It's April 3rd here in Seoul, and I'm Kim Dami. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour, starting with the ongoing medical standoff. President Yoon says he wants to sit down for talks with the junior doctors currently on a walkout from their posts. The doctors are yet to show any interest in Yoon's proposal. North Korea says that all of its missiles are now solid fuel and nuclear capable, as the regime on Wednesday claimed a success in launching a new intermediate range ballistic missile tipped with a hypersonic warhead. U.S. President Joe Biden stressed his country's pursuit of the complete denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula during phone talks with Chinese leader Xi Jinping. The two sides agreed on maintaining open communication, but also came across differences on economic and Taiwan issues. President Yoon has once again called on junior doctors to engage in constructive dialogue. And this time, he says, he's willing to have a direct conversation with them to hear what they have to say. South Korea's president's office said on Tuesday that although there are many medical associations in the country, President Yoon wishes to directly meet with the junior doctors. It added that the president's office is always open to the Korean citizens. Now, junior doctors are yet to respond to Yoon's proposal. And to cope with the doctors' absences at hospitals, the emergency medical system here in the country will run for one more month. Our Choi Soo-hyung has the latest.
The government will extend its emergency medical system for one more month to fill the gap in medical services created by the mass walkout by trainee doctors and by medical professors at general hospitals reducing their working hours. An additional 190 billion Korean, around $107 million will be spent on health insurance financing that is supporting the system. The government has also decided to provide an additional 150% as funding to hospitals running critical care and emergency room services. It is continuing to urge trainee doctors to end their collective action. On Tuesday, the Health Ministry called on them to engage in dialogue and suggest reasonable measures for cooperation.
If you stop collective actions and propose unified, rational solutions within the medical community based on science and logic, the government is open to discussions. Please deliver your messages with rational measures prioritizing patient safety.
However, despite continued urging from the government, the medical community has not responded so far. After President Yoon's medical reform speech on Monday, the Korean Medical Association stated that doctors' opinions had not been considered at all. The KMA added that doctors will not move unless the government changes its current plan to expand medical school admissions by 2,000. None of the interns newly accepted this year had registered by Tuesday, the deadline for the new employment registration. Medical professors at general hospitals reduced their working hours for a second day, but a significant reduction in medical services has yet to be seen. While there haven't been any significant changes after outpatient services and surgical procedures were reduced, eyes are now on whether they'll be reduced even further. Choi Soo-hyung, Arirang News.
North Korea has this morning claimed that it successfully test-fired a new type of solid-fuel intermediate-range ballistic missile carrying a hypersonic warhead. The North Korean media said Wednesday that its leader Kim Jong-un oversaw the first test launch of the Hwasong-60 missile the day before, and that it was aimed at verifying the reliability of the weapon system. It claimed that all of North Korea's missiles are now solid-fueled, nuclear-capable, and tipped with maneuverable warheads. This comes after the South Korean military said on Tuesday that it detected a ballistic missile fired from Pyongyang, which flew about 600 kilometers before falling into the East Sea. In the meantime, South Korea has imposed another round of sanctions against the North, targeting Russian vessels that are allegedly involved in the illicit weapons transfers to the regime. Our Pae Eun-ji has the details.
South Korea has newly added 2 Russian vessels to its sanctions list for their involvement in arms transfers by North Korea. Announcing this on Tuesday, the Foreign Ministry stressed that the government and the international community have continuously urged North Korea and Russia to halt such military cooperation. The Russian vessels, the Lady R and the Angara, were placed under sanctions for shipping a large number of containers filled with military supplies between Pyongyang and Moscow.
South Korea has announced sanctions as military cooperation between Russia and North Korea, including arms transfers, is a clear violation of UN Security Council resolutions. And these actions can be a serious threat to the Korean Peninsula, as well as global peace and security.
Tuesday's sanctions also included 2 Russian companies and the heads of both, accused of helping North Korea earn foreign currency by illegally sending its information technology workers overseas. The Russian firm Intellect LLC was put on the list for providing documents of identification needed for North Korean workers in Russia. The other company, Sojexvie, was sanctioned for illegally helping North Korean workers enter Russia and to stay there. Meanwhile, the U.S. also assessed Monday that Pyongyang continues to provide military support to Moscow amid the prolonged war in Ukraine. When asked if North Korea was still supplying Russia with weapons during a press briefing, Pentagon Deputy Spokesperson Sabrina Singh said the partnership between the two sides continues to flourish. She added that while Washington has released declassified information on North Korea-Russia military cooperation before, it will not reveal details of recent shipments. Arirang News.
Seoul's top envoy to Washington criticized Russia for its recent veto of a resolution to extend the mandate of a UN panel monitoring the enforcement of North Korean sanctions. Speaking at a press meeting on Tuesday, Ambassador Jo Hyun-dong expressed deep regret over the Russian veto in a UN Security Council vote last Thursday, emphasizing that the move tarnishes international trust in the Council. Jo further stressed that Russia's veto is an example of the close cooperation between Pyongyang and Moscow, adding that the move will have a negative impact not only on security on the Korean Peninsula, but also on the UN and the international non-proliferation regime. Now, the panel is set to expire on April 30th. U.S. President Joe Biden and Chinese President Xi Jinping have talked on the phone for the first time since their summit last November. Biden underlined Washington's enduring commitment to the complete denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. Our Lee Seung-ja has more.
Amid growing concerns over North Korea's continued missile and nuclear threats, U.S. President Joe Biden and his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping held phone talks on Tuesday. According to the White House, Biden stressed Washington's enduring commitment to the complete denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula, adding that the talks between the two leaders were candid and constructive. The White House also said that Biden reiterated the U.S. stance of engaging in diplomacy with North Korea while taking further steps to deter further provocations by the regime. Tuesday's talks also came amid worries that Russia's veto of a UNSC resolution to extend the mandate of the expert panel overseeing the implementation of North Korean sanctions will lead to a potential erosion of the sanctions regime. The two leaders also discussed the ongoing issues regarding trade. Biden said the U.S. will prevent its advanced technology from being used to undermine America's national security, adding it will continue to limit China's access to key technology, such as advanced semiconductors, as part of its de-risking policy. The U.S. leader also raised issues over what the U.S. says is China's unfair trade policies and non-market economic practices. The Oval Office said that the two leaders also reviewed and encouraged the progress from their summit in San Francisco earlier this year, including anti-drug cooperation, ongoing military-to-military communication, talks to address AI-related risks, and continuing efforts on climate change. Biden and Xi welcomed ongoing efforts to maintain open channels of communication as U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen and Secretary of State Antony Blinken are set to visit China within the next few days. This will also be followed by talks between the defense chiefs of the two countries, as well as a visit by high-ranking Chinese officials to the U.S. in the near future. Lee Seung-ja, Arirang News.
NATO foreign affairs ministers are putting their heads together in Brussels this week. And South Korea is also taking part for the third straight year. For more, we're joined by VOA correspondent Chris Keskihel. Welcome.
Good to be with you.
The two-day meeting of NATO ministers of foreign affairs is taking place in Brussels from Wednesday. Chris, what are they up to?
Well, events in the Middle East are likely to take center stage at the NATO foreign ministers meeting. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is in Paris for talks with senior officials, including French President Emmanuel Macron. Blinken arrived hours after an Israeli airstrike in central Gaza late on Monday killed 7 aid workers with World Central Kitchen, which is a disaster relief group based in Washington. Earlier in the day, a suspected Israeli warplane bombed Iran's embassy in Syria. Iran said it killed 7 of its military advisors, including 3 senior commanders. Analysts say this marks a major escalation in Israel's war with its regional adversaries. Also on Monday, France proposed a draft UN Security Council resolution that seeks options for possible UN monitoring of a ceasefire in the Gaza Strip and proposals to help the Palestinian Authority assume responsibilities. Now, you might remember the United States last week abstained from a vote to allow the 15-member council to demand an immediate ceasefire for the Muslim fasting month of Ramadan, which ends next week. The NATO foreign ministers are meeting this week ahead of a meeting of NATO countries' world leaders in July here in Washington, D.C.
So a lot on the agenda. Now, it's not just the NATO foreign ministers. South Korea, like I mentioned, has been invited to the meeting for the third straight year again. Now, why is South Korea invited again? I mean, what does that mean for South Korea?
Well, it's all part of NATO's effort to deepen its collaboration with South Korea, Japan, Australia, and New Zealand. Now, the 4 Pacific region countries were previously invited to NATO summit meetings in 2022 and 23, and New Zealand's foreign minister, along with South Korea's foreign minister, will attend this week's meetings, but Japan's and Australia's will not. Korean Foreign Minister Cho is expected to discuss the current security situation in the Indo-Pacific region and express Seoul's commitment to strengthening cooperation with NATO, his office said. Separately, Cho will meet with NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg and hold bilateral talks with foreign ministers of other major countries. Now, at a meeting last year with South Korean President Yoon Stoltenberg commended South Korea for its support of Ukraine, saying that Russia's war in Ukraine shows how security is not regional but global. Seoul and NATO have been cooperating on issues such as cyber defense, counterterrorism, and arms control. And as you recall, South Korea opened a diplomatic mission to NATO in November 2022.
So it'll be almost inevitable for the foreign ministers to discuss the war over in Ukraine and also other emerging and new security challenges. Should we expect them to issue a collective voice here? I mean, what is the latest on U.S. aid to Ukraine as well?
Well, we can expect some sort of joint statement from this foreign ministers meeting, which is standard after these types of summits. Now, the U.S. Congress left Washington for a break without deciding on supplemental funding on a bill to arm Ukraine and other allies. Republicans who oppose the funding say Congress should spend its money on domestic concerns, while Ukraine blames ammunition shortages for contributing to recent territorial losses. Meanwhile, the Republican-led U.S. House of Representatives has failed to throw Kyiv a lifeline, refusing to bring a vote on a Senate-passed emergency spending bill with $60 billion to support Ukraine. The U.S. Army says it needs to produce 100,000 155-millimeter rounds per month starting next year in 2025 to replenish the more than 2 million rounds the U.S. has sent to Ukraine and to keep giving Kyiv enough rounds to defend itself against Russia's aggression. The U.S. defense industry will not reach that goal, defense leaders say, without supplemental funding from Congress. So time is really of the essence here with the U.S. Congress to get something done for Ukraine in its war against Russia.
Definitely. Plus, apparent arms deals between North Korea and Russia will no doubt be part of the talks, right?
Yeah, given the presence of the 2 Pacific region countries' foreign ministers, that's a reasonable expectation. Meanwhile, U.S. intelligence officials told the Congress last month that North Korea has been granted some concessions by Russia in exchange for its support of its war in Ukraine. but warning that the impact still remains to be seen. But U.S. Director of National Intelligence Avril Haines added that while Russia, China, and Iran and North Korea are going closer, the prospects for a true alliance among those nations appear to be remote, at least in the intelligence view of U.S. officials.
Right, and on top of the NATO foreign ministers meeting, the NATO summit will take place in July, and that's ahead of the U.S. presidential election in November. Chris, before I let you go, where do the U.S. presidential candidates stand on NATO at the moment?
Well, NATO has grown since former President Donald Trump threatened to withdraw from the security alliance. Sweden and Finland joined the alliance over the last year, and its biggest expansion since the fall of the Soviet Union allowed Eastern Europeans to join NATO. U.S. President Joe Biden says standing up to Russian aggression together shows that NATO is working. Meanwhile, Trump, who is the presumptive Republican nominee for president, caused an uproar when he suggested in February on the campaign trail that Russia could do whatever the hell you want, his words, to the NATO countries he contends are failing to pay their fair share in security costs.
All right, thanks, Chris, for your report today. We appreciate it.
Good to be with you.
Here in South Korea, workplaces are undergoing changes as some call the trend office Big Bang era. Now, jumping on this trend, South Korea's Jeju Island recently introduced a new type of office culture. Our culture correspondent Song Yujin has this report.
It's a typical workday on Jeju Island. Inside the 7-story building in Jeju City, Kim Sung-uk is busy at work. Kim works for the Jeju provincial government, but today, instead of heading to the government complex, he's here at a second office. So this is a 소통 center or communication center in Jeju City. So here, people can read books and try out a wide range of cultural activities like carpentry and cooking, but for some, this is another office. Kim is among the more than 60 participants in the Jeju Special Self-Governing Province's Another Office project. In March, Jeju became the first local government in Korea to launch this initiative.
The office environment has a profound impact on human behavior, cognition, and psychology. Yet, the public sector tends to be rigid, making it challenging to foster cognitive flexibility and creativity. So we started exploring alternative office spaces outside.
Currently, there are 13 of these offices across the island, 8 in Jeju City and 5 in Seogwipo City. About 800 level 6 or below Jeju government employees are eligible to apply. They just have to select a date and location and sign up a week before. For them, it's an opportunity to enhance their work efficiency, which is why Kim Sung-uk has already used the program 3 times.
Tasks like documenting last year's work require my full attention. In the office, I sometimes spend the whole day on something that could be done in 1 or 2 hours. Especially when my boss calls, I help out colleagues or receive multiple phone calls. So I saw another office as the perfect solution for staying focused. Communicating with my colleagues is not a problem as I can do so via phone, video calls, and online messaging.
For the government, there is no financial burden as all of these offices are public or government-owned buildings. While Jeju is the only region that has adopted this system so far, this reflects a growing trend in Korea's workplace culture.
After COVID, many companies have adopted remote working or working outside traditional office settings. Local governments, particularly outside the major cities, see this trend as a way to attract talent and boost their economies.
Throughout the year, Jeju plans to open up more workspaces and expand participation so that more people can have their own another office. 송유진, 아리랑 뉴스, 제주.
Good morning. I'm Kim Si-young, and now we turn over to stories from around the world. UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres on Tuesday called an Israel Defense Forces attack that killed 7 aid workers the day before unconscionable and devastating, while world leaders have also asked Israel to explain its action. World Central Kitchen confirmed on Tuesday that 7 members of its team traveling in a deconflicted zone in Gaza in 2 armored cars with the WCK logo visible and an additional vehicle were killed. The IDF airstrike killed citizens from Australia, Poland, the United Kingdom, and a US-Canada dual citizen, as well as a Palestinian driver. Israel said it is investigating the incident, with PM Benjamin Netanyahu calling the airstrike a mistake. WCK immediately suspended operations at 68 community kitchens in Gaza. Israel has long denied accusations that it is hindering the distribution of aid in the region. At least 196 humanitarian workers have been killed in Gaza since Hamas attacked Israel on October 7th. Now to Senegal, where the country's 5th and youngest president was sworn in on Tuesday. 44-year-old newly elected leader Bassirou Diomaye Faye said he will answer to the results of the ballot box that express a profound desire for systematic change in Senegal. Faye defeated Amadou Ba, the candidate of outgoing President Macky Sall's ruling coalition, in the March 24th election. The former tax inspector, who was released from an 11-month prison term just before the presidential election, promised change in Senegal. He had been arrested and sentenced for social media posts critical of the previous administration. His campaign included pledges of anti-corruption and better management of the country's natural resources in the region of West Africa, with a history of political turbulence, including coups and attempted coups. In Turkey, at least 29 people have been killed in a fire that broke out at a nightclub in central Istanbul during daytime renovation work on Tuesday local time. Istanbul Governor Davut Gül said that the fire broke out just after midday, while the cause remains yet unclear. Firefighters and emergency workers surrounded the child entrance of the club to try and contain the fire, while 3 prosecutors investigating the blaze ordered 5 people to be detained. The newly re-elected mayor of Istanbul, Ekrem İmamoğlu, said later the same day that the club had not applied for the correct construction permit. The masquerade club was occupying 2 floors in the basement of a 16-story residential building in the city's central Gayrettepe district. One of the oldest books known to mankind, the Crosby Showen Codex, created around 250 to 350 AD, is expected to fetch over $2.6 million at a Christie's auction in London this June. One of the earliest known texts of 2 books of the Bible, the first epistle of Peter and the book of Jonah, consists of 104 pages and was written in Coptic on papyrus by one scribe over a period of 40 years at one of the very first Christian monasteries founded by Saint Pachomius in Upper Egypt. It was discovered in Egypt in the early 1950s and has had 2 owners, the University of Mississippi and the Norwegian manuscript collector, Dr. Martin Schoen.
Good morning. Spring rain has been soaking most of Korea today. Wet clouds will gradually spread to the rest of northern regions as the morning goes on. And mountainous regions could see up to 60 millimeters with a heavy rain advisory issued there. The capital area will see spotty rain through mid-afternoon. Rain clouds will let up from the north, so those in Jeju and Jeollanam-do should brace for heavy rain through tonight. Rain brings down the highs in southern parts of Korea. Temperatures go down nearly 10 degrees lower in some of southern regions. That's including over in Daegu. Meanwhile, Busan gets up to 16 degrees Celsius, Seoul topping out at 20 degrees with a dry advisory in place in the capital. But today's rain should help to ease the dryness. Humidity yesterday was as low as just 18%, while the ideal humidity level around this time should be around 50%.
Fine spring weather returns tomorrow with temperatures staying above normal for the next 5 days. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
We thank you for watching New Day at Arirang. We'll be back tomorrow for Thursday's edition at the same time, 9 a.m. Korea time.
Welcome. (24시간) 불이 꺼지지 않는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니? 하나, 둘, 셋.
Hey, Mr. Cupid, make sure you listen to what I say. I may be stupid or quite naive.
끝없이 쏟아지는 포토스팟. 휴대폰 한 대로 감당할 수 있겠니?
Arrow straight through my heart.
Welcome. 엄청난 에너지를 춤으로 뿜어내는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니?
Get your pork belly in your medium-sized pot. So once you get this going, for what we want to do, simple kimchi you've ever. Make sure all that salt is dissolving. Just grab a chopstick, kind of 2-inch pieces. Okay. All right. It's really, really good.
한국에 오면 먹어야죠. 먹어도 먹어도 끝이 없는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니? 하나, 둘, 셋.
Hey, Mr. Cupid, look my way. Make sure you listen to what I say. I may be stupid or quite naive.
끝없이 쏟아지는 포토스팟. 휴대폰 한 대로 감당할 수 있겠니?
Arrow straight through my heart.
웰컴. 엄청난 에너지를 춤으로 뿜어내는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니?
We're here to make a new type of news.
New insights, new styles, and new topics every day.
We are News Generation.
Making news just for you. It's April 3rd here in Seoul. I'm Shin Yeun, and you're watching News Generation. Joining me in the studio is Walter Lee.
Lovely to be here.
And Kwon Ju-yeon.
Happy day.
Good morning. Now, both are here to speak on behalf of people in their 20s and 30s. As usual, let's start with our news feed, which covers different hashtags and news items that have been trending on social media over the past 24 hours. Cherry blossoms haven't been booming as scheduled. That's why some of the nation's biggest cherry blossom festivals have decided to extend their running time. Yeouido, for instance, has decided to extend its festival by an extra 4 days. Originally, the festival was set to wrap up on the 4th at 10 p.m., but instead, it will last until 2 p.m. on Monday, the 8th. Moving on, over 6 out of 10 people living abroad said they had a positive perception of Korea after experiencing popular K-cultural content. In a report issued by the Ministry of Culture, Sports and Tourism, 66.1% of respondents who engaged with Korean content said it had a favorable impact on their perception of Korea. This was a 5.8 percentage point increase from the year 2022. The report was based on an online survey conducted in November on some 25,000 people residing in 26 countries worldwide. And OpenAI announced on Monday that users can now access the chatbot by simply visiting the website instead of creating an account and signing up. This could introduce a flood of new users who may have wanted to use this chatbot but did not want to create an account or sign in every time. The company also said it has included additional content safeguards such as blocking prompts in more categories. ChatGPT was first released in 2022. In just 2 months, it hit over 100 million users. And since its release, it has gone through many updates so that users could better get what they wanted, whether that's high-quality essays or images. And we've come leaps and bounds with generative AI. And any notable updates over the past few months that you two in the studio have tried out for yourselves, or what else would you like to see AI cover from now on?
Well, I do use ChatGPT every single day. It's like a confession to you. I use it to verify facts and information, cutting down my time searching on websites. And yes, ChatGPT makes mistakes. When I search my name, Kwon Ju-yeon, it says I work here at Arirang TV, but it says I'm a Miss Korea. Incorrect. Yeah, though it's not flawless, I find it quite incredible and useful indeed. And in the future, I would like to have a tangible ChatGPT robot so that it can help alleviate my work and take care of my kids, and also manage the household chores for me. This will definitely make my life easier to navigate.
Exactly. A tangible robot that helps you not only with information, but physically. Now, what about you?
Yes, so I had actually a very good conversation with ChatGPT today.
Okay.
Before the show, I asked questions like, what is the meaning of life? Tell me a joke. I also tried to push the limits of like, can you tell me a dirty joke? And it said it couldn't do that. So they, like I said, they are trying their best to, you know, cut down some funny or, you know, outlandish things that you can ask them. But what I'd like to see them improve is the translation language model, which I've been using over the last couple of weeks and have noticed that there are a lot of flaws in it. And that's because, and I even asked, why are you not good at translating language? And it said the fact that there are idioms and expressions and also nuances that are different, like language to language. So that's the reason why they cannot do that. So once they improve this translation language model, that's when I'll start using it a lot more. But until then, yeah, I don't use it for translation.
Walter, I think we need more users like yourself to motivate ChatGPT to even go further in leaps and bounds. Yes. And hopefully we'll see more development there. Now, in the meantime, let's switch gears to our main discussion topic of the day. We've been seeing a growing number of dual income couples in Korea, even among households with children. Recently, the Korea Women's Policy Institute released results from a study that found that childcare was concentrated more on women than men. To be exact, women invested twice as much time into their children than men did. And we're going to be talking about this gender discrepancy pattern in the childcare time allocation of dual income couples. So Walter, why don't you tell us a bit more about the Institute's latest study? Yeah, so if we take a look at the screen, I can actually show you what we've got ready for you. So according to the Korean Women's Development Institute, in dual income households, the mother of the household spends on average 11.69 hours a day taking care of their child or children, while on the other hand, fathers only spend 4.71 hours on looking after their young ones. Now, I will say that I am an outlier of that statistic, which we'll get into a little bit later, but as you can see, there is still a very much one-sided, I guess, side to who is taking care of the kids. And Chuyun, would you like to elaborate more on why we're seeing such an imbalance as to why working moms are pouring more time to their children compared to working dads?
Of course, well, the burden of childcare before going to work and after returning home was mostly on the mothers. Yep. Before 8 a.m. to be exact, mothers took care of their children 60 to 80% of the time, whereas fathers were in the range of 10% during the same period of time. By midnight after returning home, mothers took care of the children over 70% of the time, whereas men were only involved 2 to 3%. Where are them and where were them? Right. Yes. Exactly. There seems to be a definite discrepancy there, but why? Why are we seeing such an imbalance in the time that working moms are spending to their child compared to working dads, even though it seems like they have the same condition? It's both their child and they're both working. Yeah, you're correct there. So traditionally, not just in Korean society, but in many societies around the world, the persistent perception that the childcare is mainly the responsibility of the woman. Now, despite the fact that even though they might be working, it's still somewhat handed over to the female side. I know that I grew up on that belief as well. My mother and father were both working, but my mum took care of me most of the time. Like I said, I'm trying to help change that perception and make it look cool again, or cool from the start. But Korea is a conservative society, and this traditional style of raising kids is still something that's very prevalent here in Korea. Right, there seems to be conservative gender roles tied down to as to who should be doing childcare based on gender. Chuyun, would you like to add on? Yes, of course. Well, in Korean society, parental leave still isn't freely available. While more men are starting to take this time off for their child, many still feel pressure from their jobs or their company that they work for. Therefore, many fathers find it quite difficult to actively participate in childcare due to the lack of, flexible hours, working hours, or parental leave options. And both of you have kids and are from dual income households, so I'm quite curious as to how you personally allocate your childcare time with your wife. Okay, so this is actually sort of great timing for me to do this topic today. As of from this week, my wife goes back to work after taking a year off maternity leave. Now, before she went back to work, we had a serious talk on what we wanted for our child and how we're going to allocate our tasks. For me, the most important thing is that we, meaning my wife and I, have to be the biggest influence on our daughter, meaning that we don't want a third party heavily involved in our daughter's upbringing. For example,
example, a nanny or a grandparent. Now, that's not having a jab at people who do it that way, because I understand that sometimes circumstances have to mean that you need a nanny or get your grandparent to do it. But just for us, since I'm a freelancer, I do have the availability to move my schedules around. So I moved everything into the morning and then took everything off in the afternoon. So my wife takes care of our child in the morning for around 2 hours. So she gets up and she feeds the baby and she takes her to daycare. Now, I will pick my baby up then from around 4 o'clock, and then until she goes to sleep, she's in the care of me. So I'm actually taking care more of my baby in regards to time than my wife is. So I'm taking on that part-time stay-at-home dad role. But yes, I'm also doing house chores and cooking and cleaning. I think I'd be a pretty good stay-at-home dad.
It's not an easy thing to do, but you are going into that ideal route. You seem to be the outlier compared to the stats that we've seen so far.
Yeah.
But I also think it's only possible because you're a freelancer too.
True.
It's more flexible with the working hours. And Chuyeon, as you mentioned, for regular time workers out there, it seems to be very difficult because paternity leave or maternity leave isn't really easily accessible by hand. But what about you as a working mom with beautiful 2 sons? How do you allocate your childcare time with your husband?
Well, we divide childcare by sharing tasks and communicating about who does what. In the early morning, I'm in charge of my first son. I sent him to kindergarten, and the thing is, the day before, I actually prepare the 2 sons' bags, their clothes, and even the breakfast. And my father, not my father, but their father, my husband, is in charge of the second son. He feeds him and sent him to nursery school. And I don't actually think this is, I'm doing parenting. I consider this as, I think this as something, spending precious time with my kids and my family. And it's quite important to consider and think about to have these open discussions and flexibility to adjust responsibilities based on your schedules and your strengths. Because like, if I've got to work late at night, he understands, he knows what to do. And if he has to work till late at night, which is usually from Monday to Sunday, I look after the kids at the same time. And I would like to mention this, the hubby, my husband, he's not helping parenting, we are doing it together. And he knows what will happen to him if he doesn't participate in the household chores and the parenting. He will end up getting all the irritation and anger from me.
I mean, happy wife, happy life, and happy co-parenting is the way to go. But as a person who's not married, no children yet, I'm quite curious as to how difficult it is for you to be balancing work and taking care of your child at the same time. And what if we see this continuous trend of only moms pouring in, working moms that is, pouring more time to their children compared to their husbands?
Yeah, so like I mentioned, and we mentioned, I'm a freelancer, so I am able to, change my schedule according to what my daughter is doing. And that's unfortunately something I have had trouble getting used to, is adjusting to her schedule when she has to go to sleep and when she has to eat. I have to be around for those times, so I have to make sure I leave work at a certain time, which can be quite difficult when you have so many deadlines to meet, and you as a freelancer, you grab every job you can, and then you have to somehow stick it within 1 week or 1 day, so that happens. But I always use this example for people who don't have kids, and they ask me how difficult having a child is, and that is, people without children, you can do whatever you want anytime you want. But with us parents, we have to rely on, making time for our children. Like Jihyun said, it's actually not working. We're actually parenting. What we're doing is, though it feels like work sometimes, we are spending a lot of precious time with our children. I'm sure that Jihyun and I could actually go on for hours how difficult it is. But to answer your second question, it is hard to answer, I think. I think it is healthy for children to have equal amounts of time with both the mother and the father. However, we just know that's not possible given today's society, and hopefully we do see changes in the future. Yes, there still are more fathers at work and more mothers at home, But I'm hoping that this trend will change, and I'm hoping to be one of the people to help that trend change.
Right, and I think you are pioneering that trend. What about you, Jian?
Well, my husband and I work in the same industry. We work in the broadcasting field. I'm a freelancer, and he owns his own company. So when we have some evening schedules, we need to find an appropriate place, the right person to take care of two sons. It's quite stressful. If we can't find someone, we have to bring the two sons to the shooting place, and it's insane indeed and crazy. And when I'm sick, everything just seems to go wrong. That means only one person should take care of the two babies, two kids. And I want to stop complaining, but let me continue. Managing household chores while taking care of the two kids, it's quite insane. I mean, it's tough indeed. So when it gets really tough at a certain level, I just don't do it. I stop doing the dishes or doing the laundry and just look after the kids. And that's really good for my mental health, and for the sake of my mental health, and also for the sake of their safety, the three men's safety. And I actually teach my two boys to actively participate in managing the household chores, because that will be their future. And if they don't do that, I tell my first one, because the second son doesn't understand anymore, at all. I tell them that mummy might leave the house, like the one in the Piggy book written by Anthony Brown. The character that mum leaves the house because the two sons and the husband doesn't help the household chores.
And then it turns into a pigsty, which is hence why it's called the Piggy book.
That's correct.
And I'd like to say it is discouraging to hear that we're still seeing an imbalance as to working moms pouring time compared to working dads. And I think it's up to our generation, millennials and Gen Z parents out there, as you're doing, Chuyeon, teaching Alpha generation, that it shouldn't be like that. There shouldn't be a separation there, because the condition is the same. Both of them are working, and it's both of their child. Now, we asked our viewers to tell us what it's like in their respective countries as well, whether there's also an imbalance in the number of hours working moms and dads pour into their kids. If you take a look at the screen, you can find out what 3 of them had to share with us. Let's start with Leon. Leon said, overall, Singapore is gradually moving towards more equal parenting within double-income families. However, traditional norms and social structures continue to play a role in shaping parenting dynamics. And Chip said, it obviously depends on the individual household, but in Canada, there seems to be a pretty good split. Families get up to 18 months of leave, which can be divided between parents, which is helpful. I remember seeing dads with babies at parks or walking back and forth on the street so that the moms could catch up on sleep. Sunny said it's better compared to the past. Nowadays, it's much easier to see dads who are involved in parenting. However, there are still some tendencies that moms should be the ones who takes responsibilities for parenting, and this type of perception should change as soon as possible. And to better analyze this trend and some unforeseen consequences that can come about, we're going to include a professor of sociology in our talks, so stay tuned for a live interview. Let's now turn to Lee Joo-hee, a professor of sociology at Ewha Woods University. Welcome, Professor Lee.
Hello.
All right, so we've been trying to analyze the reason between dual-income couples in Korea spending different amounts of time towards their children. But as an expert, what do you think is the main reason there?
I think it's because Korea is still a patriarchal society with separate peers ideology that greatly emphasizes breadwinner, homemaker, gender division of labor. There are 2 different important structural factors underlying this strong norm. The first one is sex gap in pay. Korean women workers earn only 65% of what male workers make. As long as women's expected earnings lag significantly behind their partners, households will adopt unequal specialization strategies, and women will continue to shoulder the lion's share of childcare and housework. And such low wages also affect power relations within couples. Assuming that most people would prefer to do less housework, a partner with higher earnings is more likely to get his way in household decision-making, and he would prefer to spend his time on either leisure or market work instead of childcare. The second factor maybe even more important than the first one, you also mentioned the extremely long and inflexible working hours also contribute to unequal distribution of childcare hours. As you know, Korea is one of the most overworked countries. Almost 20% of Koreans work more than 48 hours per week. If some people work too many hours in a country, then others have to work few hours because men work such long hours. Almost 30% of Korean women have to work part-time.
Right.
This uneven distribution of working time between gender deprives men of their time to care for children, strengthening the male breadwinner model, I think.
And can you just give us an example of what it's like in other parts of the world?
I must say that despite rising women's employment, men's adaptation hasn't matched the changes in women's roles, even in most developed countries. Recent studies do, however, identify a sharp rise in egalitarian practices in some countries, especially Nordic ones. These countries have advanced farthest in the dual career model. For example, the average Danish man did 41% of the housework in his family, and almost 30% of Danish men did more than 50% of the housework, even as early as in 2000s. In countries like Italy and Spain fell behind in the adoption of gender equality at home. S.P. Anderson, a prominent sociologist, makes the interesting observation that division of household work is more equitable in countries that provide strong public support to families, such as childcare services and parental leave for fathers. And I should mention this, I am in Scandinavia. These policies are extraordinarily generous and comprehensive. And they also provide plentiful, family-friendly public sector jobs that pay equal wages to women and men.
Interesting indeed, Professor Lee. Are we seeing this type of trend among young couples, particularly millennials and Gen Zs? And how are they evaluating this type of imbalance?
Yes, you can see this kind of trend among very young people, couples. I got the impression that young Korean women consider this type of unfair gender division of domestic labor very harmful for maintaining their career.
Yeah.
And this is one of the reasons why we have such a low fertility rate recently. Young Korean women began to embrace the typical male life cycle model. So I think an egalitarian project must somehow induce young men to embrace a more feminine lifestyle, or feminine life cycle. Otherwise, we would live in a world with almost no children, I'm afraid.
Exactly. I think getting both genders on board with the idea that childcare or domestic labor should be allocated amongst themselves regardless of gender roles and stereotypical traditions is key. Thank you so much, Professor Lee. It was a pleasure talking to you today.
Yes, thank you so much.
All right, and as a measure to boost birth rates in one of the lowest birth rate country in the world, I do think it's important that we better facilitate equality in domestic labor and childcare. So what are your solutions or ideas on this matter?
Okay, so here's the thing. Though I agree with equality, there are some mothers who like being stay-at-home mothers, and there are some men who like to be the breadwinners. But it also goes vice versa. Like I said, I'd love to be a stay-at-home dad, but unfortunately, because the world costs a lot, I have to go to work. But if, in my opinion, it really just comes down to the family's wants and needs. But yes, when it comes to raising a child, it does take two people, like, if it's possible.
Better understanding that it shouldn't be, I really like what you said. It's not about helping the mom. It should be co-parenting.
I know.
Just doing your job. What are your thoughts on
doing it together? So to foster greater equality in childcare, I do believe that both parents should share their tasks and they should talk about it. They should have open discussions a lot and a flexibility to adjust, you know, some responsibilities based on their schedules or their strengths or characters sometimes, as I mentioned earlier, and let moms and dads go home. Have this flexible working hours for them. And for the future, we should teach everybody to value both parents' roles in raising kids.
Exactly, and as the professor mentioned too, it's not just our perceptions that need to change. The infrastructure, companies, the government, policies need to be changing. And this is not just a small issue that happens inside households. I think it's a societal issue that we should all take part in and realize that equality needs to be there for us to see equality at home. Now, in the meantime, we'll be here every day from 9:30 to 10 a.m. Korea time, bringing you more topics young people are talking about. Special thanks to Walter Lee.
Lovely to be here.
And Kwon Ji-young.
Thank you for having me.
All right, and thank you everyone for watching. We'll see you tomorrow. We are News Generation.
하나, 둘, 셋.
Hey, Mr. Cupid, look my way. Make sure you listen to what I say. I may be stupid or quite naive.
끝없이 쏟아지는 포토 스팟.